Have you ever noticed how all younger middle-aged white dudes on YouTube look the exact same? Like they have the same glasses and they have the same beard? I have a hat, but only because I'm balding, like every other low middle-aged white guy on YouTube. Recently, I have started the Cradle series and I read the book Unsouled, which I have a review for up here. And I thought this was a really interesting series and it was delving into an entirely different genre than anything I've ever read before. I made the comparison to shonen anime when I was talking about that book before. I made a lot of comparisons to Dragon Ball Z. In the comments for that video, I also saw comparisons where people said it was more like wuxia or xianxia, which are essentially like the Chinese versions of like the shonen type genre. In the Western world, we've started calling it progression fantasy, which has sort of become an umbrella term for any types of fantasy where there is a major progression happening, whether it's through items or leveling up in a sorts. I guess that's the more accurate way, is to say that this book is some amalgamation inspired by all of these types of genres. But what I would like to propose here today when I'm making this video is a simple way to describe the Cradle series is to call it the crack cocaine of fantasy. Essentially, you get a little bit of a dose of what you're looking for in Unsouled, and then what Soulsmith has done is it has amplified the higher highs so that you're always craving something more. And similar to something like crack cocaine, you are leaving a lot of things in your past because you just got to chase that new high. Unsouled allows us to take a deeper dive into the magic system, into specifics. If you're familiar with the term soulsmithing from the first book, or in general, it's essentially the way to imbue magic into other things or to create things using the magic. And we get specific ways of how that is done in this world according to this magic system in the book Soulsmith. Additionally, as the characters progress forward in the story, we get teases of course, higher highs. But this book does something that I was lacking a little bit in the first one, which is it allows us to dwell a little bit longer, just a little bit longer with each of the elements that were introduced as far as world building, different clans, different types of the magic. It is slowed down just enough, just the teeniest, tiniest bit, so that we actually feel like some of the things that we're learning are semi-permanent, as opposed to the first book, where it felt like a lot of the things that we spent a lot of time with in the first half of the book, they were completely transitory, so you had a hard time knowing what you should care about when you were progressing so fast. This book is still incredibly fast. It's still very short. We're still getting a huge escalation from the characters at the beginning of the book to the end of the book. This is not the type of book where things end up in the same situation that they started, but we're doing so at a pace that allows us to feel like we are actually understanding more things concretely while still giving us that tease of where things could be going in the future. In case you haven't read Unsouled or are familiar with this genre, it still very much feels like those classic 90s anime shows where things do feel episodic, and it does feel like we're moving from one scenario to another, but more of the pieces are carried forward as the story progresses to where we feel like everything that we're learning feels more important moving forward, and we're not just throwing away every single thing that we just saw. We're actually getting concrete world building that matters. But we're also continuing to get very cool action, very cool magic. I feel like Lyndon and Urien are now reaching a place where we understand their relationship a little bit more, but we don't fully understand who these people are as characters, but we get enough teases that we want to see the next season of this television show, which would be the third book, Black Flame. And we get just enough explanation of what the title of the next book, Black Flame, means that I just want to jump right into book 3, which I will do, but I'm recording this video. I made myself stop reading so I could record this video and not have my thoughts on the third book tarnished by anything that might happen as I start that next book. I didn't even listen to the preview chapters at the end of the audiobook for the first one. But the teases that we have for the setup of book 3, continuing from the pieces that we saw in book 2, are pretty incredible. And in my video for the first book, I talked about how there is this side plot going on. We have the main character, Lyndon, doing his thing, but we also have the teases of this other extra huge element story that's sort of getting teased along the side. Well, we understand a little bit more of it now. We're more familiar with the context where it's switching back and forth between them, and we know what that means, but also we don't know what it means, but I have to know. Soulsmith essentially becomes what I think of as like one of the perfect ways to do a sequel, and it improves on the flaws that I had from the first book in basically every way. The fact that these books were only published 2 months apart in the same calendar year is incredible, because I feel like the writing has improved a lot, and the way that the story was developing is so much better paced than that first book. It's incredible to see the escalation of the quality of the books itself, and the story itself, and the pacing itself. It's really good. Because of this book always always trying to hit dopamine hits, it does feel like there is not as much depth in some sense to the character development as you might expect in normal epic fantasy. There's not as much depth and sitting in the moments to allow them to really take full effect. But I feel like this is borrowing from genres that are marketed at young males mostly, and they really aim for that constant adrenaline rush. We never spend too much time dwelling on the scenery. We're not going to spend time describing every single tree along the way. This is like the complete opposite of that. In a way, it's almost like quest fantasy, but on speed. Another drug. And as I was reading through this book, I talked about it a little bit on the Discord that I have, which is available in the links down below. There's a Discord, and I have channels in that Discord for each of the books, so come talk about Cradle if you want to down there. But I think that Cradle does a really good job at balancing the idea of new fantasy readers, onboarding them onto the concept of magic systems and world building, but it doesn't do it in a way that is overly bogged down or extremely pretentious in the fact that it requires you to give a lot. Like, this book is just constantly giving to you, and you don't have to offer all that much. You don't have to put up with all that much. If you are a fantasy reader who is looking to read fantasy, but you are intimidated by some of the craziness that comes from the Cosmere or the Lord of the Rings or one of these other big, huge things like Rothfuss or a Martin, this book is almost the antithesis of that. It's a great way to transition from YA to epic fantasy because there are many, many elements from epic fantasy contained in this, but without all the fluff. And instead of fluff, you get more action, you get less characters living inside their own head, and the thing just moves. It just zips along. I just like casually listened to the audiobook for Soulsmith, and all of a sudden I'm to a point where I can't put it down because it's really good, and then I'm done. And now I just have to pick up book 3. If you saw my video review for Unsouled and you're still questioning whether you should read this series or not, based on the qualms that I had with the series at that point, I will say that book 2 fixes and addresses a lot of those problems and also just ramps up the good parts to the point where, hey, this is just a lot of fun. Has it reached the point of one of my favorite series of all time yet? Not yet, but it's definitely something that by book 2, I feel way more comfortable recommending if any of it sounds interesting at all. And if you're looking for something quick as a palate cleanser, or you're just bogged down, you're in a reading slump or something, I feel like this is a great point to jump on and feel like you're making huge progress and you feel good doing it. There's a good high, and maybe I'm enjoying it enough that you get a contact high just from watching this video. If you like this video, please smash the like button. If you'd like to see more videos from me about this series or anything else science fiction, fantasy, or whatever I happen to read related, you can hit the subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all. Please don't do drugs. Please do read good fantasy. I can't force you to do anything because I'm not your dad, but I am your best friend. See you next time.
Sleep, no one ever get enough. Always looking out tired. Sleep, no one ever get enough. If it don't show up, I might get fired. Sleep, no one ever get enough. Always looking out tired. Sleep, no one ever get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired.